So right after I got done putting the finishing touches on today's content, and right after I got out of our National College Football Pick'em show over on the Bleacher Report app, which, by the way, if you haven't been keeping up with, I highly recommend you do so. Currently, I'm sitting at 67 correct picks, 17 incorrect picks, and that's a streak I hope to have keep going. But right as I get out of all of that, one of the biggest headlines of the college football news cycle of the entire year, certainly the biggest headline of the news cycle for this week, comes down the pipe. And of course, that's that Colorado offensive coordinator Sean Lewis will not be the one calling plays versus Oregon State. He will only be signaling them in. In fact, Brett McMurphy tweets that Colorado quality control analyst Pat Shurmur will take over play calling duties from OC Sean Lewis versus Oregon State. This is a massive headline, one we need to dive into. But before we can, as always, y'all know the drill. I have got to hear from you. Hop down to the comments. Give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Do you agree with this move? And more importantly, did you think Sean Lewis was the problem? I can't wait to hear from you. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification as I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed the content, be sure to like and comment down below. But having said all that, let's dive right into this. And look, we're not going to take long talking about this, but this was super surprising in my opinion. Because Sean Lewis is someone I've talked about extensively here on the channel. Whenever he was hired, I championed the hire for Coach Prime because I thought it was one of the best hires he's made. We need to understand who Sean Lewis is. He came to be Colorado's offensive coordinator after being a head coach at Kent State, a head coach that, by the way, was putting up massive offensive numbers, and he became synonymous with high-powered offenses within college football. That's why whenever Colorado got him and we looked at some of the personnel he'd be able to work with, I was really excited, and early results were certainly paying off. But Colorado fans have become to start pointing the finger at Sean Lewis, and it's been a little bit perplexing to me because, in my opinion, Sean Lewis is not the major issue. Now look, I understand that Stanford loss, that hurt, and there's a lot of coaches who certainly aren't absolved from blame in that game, and I'm not trying to say Sean Lewis should be absolved from blame in that game. You were up big, you should have closed the game out and went home with a W. But let's also give credit where credit is due. Stanford didn't score a bunch of points on the Colorado offense, they scored a bunch of points on the Colorado defense. And yes, the offense has had some snags, but why is that? And whenever I start asking the question of why the Colorado offense has had some snags, it's because they don't have a consistent running game, which largely stems from their inconsistent offensive line. The inconsistent offensive line that just about got Deion Sandes killed a week ago. And if you're asking yourself, why are we continually throwing the football? It's because opposing defenses aren't respecting your offensive front. They don't believe that you can just run it down their throat, and they're able to win those sets more often than they're not. Now, I understand Colorado has some phenomenally talented running backs. I think Dylan Edwards is going to be a dude. I think Alton McCaskill is going to be a dude. Cavassier Smoke is a dude. There's a lot of talent, but the offensive line is a really shaky unit right now, and that's been the biggest hindrance to the offense in my opinion. It hasn't been the play caller. Sean Lewis is inevitably not able to do all the things he wants to do because he doesn't have an offensive line that's allowing him the time to do it. He also doesn't have a defense that allows him to slow the game down in most instances, because more often than not, Colorado has to win in shootout scenarios. And Sean Lewis has been great at that. They've been able to push the ball downfield, and Deion Sandes has been automatic. But it's part of the reason why this stood out to me so much, because no doubt about it, Pat Shurmur is a good coach. This is a man who comes from the NFL ranks, and if you can get an NFL guy to be your offensive coordinator, you typically don't argue. But the big question to me was, is Sean Lewis the big problem at Colorado? And the overwhelming answer to that question, in my opinion, is no. No, it's not. Colorado has one of the better offenses in the nation, and they're doing that despite having one of the worst offensive lines in the nation. That typically doesn't happen. I think that's a testament to Deion Sandes. I think that's a testament to some of the skill players, but I certainly think that's a testament to Sean Lewis as well. His guidance has allowed this offense to flourish. And once again, I'm not absolving Sean Lewis from any blame that may fall in his lap from the Stanford game or any subsequent games. That's not my contention here. My contention is looking at the situation and saying, hey, you have an offense that largely ranks as one of the better offenses in the nation, especially your passing game. Your offensive line ranks as one of the worst offensive lines in the nation, both in terms of run blocking and certainly keeping Shedeur upright. So it's kind of hard for Sean Lewis to slow a game down when the offensive line doesn't allow him to do that. But the big issue with Colorado is the other side of the football. Because, ladies and gentlemen, there are non-Power 5 teams that have a vastly superior defense to the Colorado Buffaloes. If I look at where Colorado ranks in total defense, well, they rank at a whopping 129 out of 130 eligible teams. That's not good. That's not good, and it brings me back to what I said. Stanford didn't score on your offense. They scored on your defense, which has been one of the most porous units in the nation. Teams like Western Kentucky, Nevada, ULM, Temple, Colorado State, South Florida, Tulsa, Vanderbilt, FIU, App State, UAB, Middle Tennessee, Texas State, Utah State, New Mexico, Central Michigan, all have defenses that are grading better than the Colorado Buffaloes. Now, in fairness, Colorado has played offenses that the majority of those teams haven't. So that's going to skew the stats in favor of the teams that haven't played the offensive teams that the Colorado Buffalo has. I'm looking at USC. I'm looking at Oregon, two teams who can push the issue and are high-powered offenses. Certainly, Colorado, whenever we talk about the defense and the lack thereof the defense, we have to give credit where it's due and have that conversation with the understanding of, yes, they may rank worse than a team such as New Mexico. New Mexico hasn't had to play some of the offenses that Colorado has had to play. So I do grant you that, but Stanford isn't a top-tier offense. And Stanford was able to come back from 29 down. That's not all on the offense. In fact, if Colorado had a defense that was ranked as a top 35, top 40 unit in the nation, they wouldn't have been in as many shootouts. Sean Lewis wouldn't have to push the issue so much because he would understand I can rely on my defense to get a stop. Right now, Sean Lewis is operating under the assumption we got to score. We got to go out and take the win. Because that's how our wins have been found, by taking the wins. This is a little bit of a perplexing move, and I'm really curious to see how it works, because in my opinion, Sean Lewis was not the issue. And yes, Pat Shurmur is a great coach, but I can imagine if this is something that lasts long term, it's not going to take long for pretty much, well, every major institution out there to call Boulder and say, hey, if you don't want Sean Lewis as your offensive coordinator, we'll certainly take him as our offensive coordinator. So I'm really interested to see how this all works out. Really interested to see what this means and how they do against Oregon State, a game we talked about lightly on a separate video that's already out. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. That's it. See ya.